Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm here with Jessica Roner. Jessica is a freelance visual merchandiser and wardrobe stylist. She has worked for LVMH and Louis Vuitton. She has worked for the brand that owns Wrangler and Lee's Denim, which is fascinating because we've got kind of like cowboys and we got like the upper echelon of society. Jessica, thanks for being with me here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a real privilege to have you. I'm super excited to talk to you about specifically visual merchandising. Before we do, let's just kind of hear a little bit, like 20, 30 seconds about who you are and, your past roles really quickly, specifically with Louis Vuitton.
Sure. So, over the years, I've held various positions in merchandising and design departments where I've expanded product lines and repositioned niche product categories, and helping that with elevated merchandise. So, having a 360 view of the apparel industry, I was really wanting to merge design and merchandising and bring it to life for the consumer. So, that's how I landed at Louis Vuitton and specifically working as a visual merchandiser and retail operations. So partnering with the Maison on Fifth Avenue and telling a story and drawing consumers in from the window displays to the mannequins to case lines and figuring out, okay, how can we portray the brand guidelines and the mission of the brand through
Mm,
the product that would
yeah.
entice people to continue to purchase.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, Louis Vuitton is a if there is an iconic brand globally, I mean that is certainly one of them. And um, to be able to kind of create that first impression must have been a pretty remarkable job to work in. So, can you just maybe kick off this interview by just telling us like what is visual merchandising? What does that actually mean to you?
Sure. So visual merchandising essentially is establishing like visual ideas to be used as themes and something that's brand specific for that brand throughout multiple stores and
Mm.
locations. It also includes like planning and executing floor sets
Right.
for these stores and making adjustments based on like local cultures or trends that may be happening by using their merchandise and presentation skills.
Right. And so, how did you get into the position where visual merchandising was something that you were able to do? Is this something that you studied? Is it something you have an eye for design, so you could kind of work this out?
So a little bit of both. I went to school in North Carolina at University of North Carolina in Greensboro, and I focused on consumer and apparel retail studies, and that was everything about the business of fashion. So really focusing on merchandising specifically, which is creating product lines that you see in the stores.
Right.
But we learned about, as we might talk about later, atmospherics and how people shop and the consumer psychology behind why people buy what they buy.
Right.
But working in corporate, and both merchandising, which is very analytical, and then going into design, I said, okay, you know what? I want to merge the two. So visual merchandising is really good at that because you have to know what your best sellers are. You have to know what to put in the forefront of the consumer to
Yeah.
bring them in and to purchase.
Oh, that's great. That's
Mhm.
really good. So when we look at, and you kind of just reference atmospherics, so what are atmospherics and how did that come into play when you were overseeing merchandising?
Um, for merchandise, or you mean visual merchandising, right?
Yes.
So atmospherics is really delving into like not pushing people to purchase, but you think about all the elements that comes into play in a retail setting and how that might motivate a consumer to purchase something. So whether it's music or lighting or I mean, the way that something's presented or themes that are put together, it's really pivotal because you don't want to walk into a store and it's silent and you just hear
Yeah.
racks and shuffling. Like it's not really an enjoyable experience. And and that's what shopping is supposed to be, right? An experience. So as far as visual merchandising at Louis Vuitton, it plays a huge role in how clients purchase. So Fifth Avenue is a destination center. It's like the Mecca, right? Like we don't necessarily say Louis Vuitton Fifth Avenue store. It's like the Maison. Like that's the flagship. That's where you see the ultimate, the pinnacle items, things that not necessarily on the from the runway, but the higher end ice items.
Yeah.
So, for example, the Fifth Avenue, there's two entrances. So like there's a Fifth Avenue entrance and then there's like a 57th Street entrance. Because you have like prime real estate on Fifth Avenue, it's important that your window displays, you're fighting for that real estate, right? So, or you're claiming that real estate. So you have to make sure you have the best window displays. You make sure everything is pristine. You have the right sizing. So that way, whatever people see, they come in and they ask for those items.
Right.
And when you come into the Fifth Avenue entrance, there is what is called like an invitation wall or like a display. And so
Mm.
they have all the high end items on these two displays. And it's like floating walls almost. So you can walk around them and they're two sided, but
Yeah.
they display their high end product. And
Wow.
they also have case lines in front of them. So basically just like counters, and you
Yeah.
can see like wallets or high-end jewelry or fine jewelry, because those are two different things.
Yeah.
And just, or even let's say you have a new collection that you want to display, that's a pop-up or a pop-in as they might call it. um, so it's really important that you start the storytelling piece from outside, and you
Yeah.
want to entice them and go throughout all four floors of the Maison. Another example is like I said, highlighting a new collection. So as far as fragrance, because they don't just sell clothing items, they sell fragrances. So for the new year, instructed by corporate, they were saying, hey, we want to push this fragrance. Let's make sure that on a schedule that we give a sample to the team lead managers, and you guys spray the designated areas so that consumers can or clients can ask, and that way it'll entice them. Um,
So wait, you would spray like just in the air or on items in the store?
just in the air in like certain spaces. So it's not like Abercrombie and Fitch where it's like you smell it from outside and then
Yeah, yeah.
like too much. But it's a way to have a conversation starter, and without pushing sales, because luxury is not just about the sale. It's about the relationship. It's about figuring out what the need and anticipating those needs before the consumer even knows what they want.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
that's
and
fascinating.
another instance that I was thinking of is as far as music, like visual merchandising is responsible for turning on the music in the morning. And I can't remember how it happened. Maybe we had like a meeting and then we automatically opened, but it's very apparent when music is not on. And you think
Right.
like when you walk into a store, it's not something you really think about because it's not like it's blaring, but you notice when it's not on.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you're contributing to all five senses. And speaking of that, like I think temperature is another one. That's not something that
Hmm.
obviously well, that's not true. Maybe like smaller locations might have more control over that, but that's not something that I've experienced to determine or determine like a shopping experience, mainly
Right.
because it is such a huge retail space, 4 floors. It's why like yeah, you can turn the AC on, but if it's cold outside or if it's humid, like it's gonna find its way in. So
Right.
yeah.
And so it must be pretty powerful. I mean, you're working in New York City. You're in one of the top stores in the city, in kind of the fashion hub of the globe, and you have this small area of space to draw people in. There must be a fair bit of pressure for you guys to make sure that it's perfect. Like there can't be a dust bunny. There can't be, I mean, anything, right? You got to nail it every time. Am I right?
Yes and no. Like, yes, that is true, but it doesn't fall on the shoulders of one department.
Mm,
So that's what I really love about when I was working at Louis Vuitton. It was just like it's a well-oiled machine. There are
sure.
people in place to think of anything that you can think of to make
Yeah.
sure that it's an enjoyable experience. So you have operations, you have visual merchandising, you have client advisors who actually deal with transactions and do the one-to-one service.
Mm,
You also have the corporate offices which are above us. So I mean, marketing, obviously, there's just so many different touch
Yeah.
points that
Yeah.
it's pressure from the sense of like, okay, if the store director comes up to us before we open and say, hey, these are our metrics, this is what's happened this week, we really want to focus on growing this category. It's our job to put that at the forefront and like, make it look pretty, aesthetically pleasing, like people want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
see it and buy it. But it doesn't stay the same throughout the day. So it's always changing. So as soon as someone purchases a leather bag, we have to automatically find something else if it's not an identical item and place it there. So it's always creativity that's flowing. It's not necessarily from a, oh my gosh, I have to make this sale of my goal
Yeah.
type of thing.
Yeah. So when we look at visual merchandising in the luxury market, how does it differ if you were to work in fast fashion, or even when you were working for Wrangler or Lee's?
Mm-hmm.
How are things differing in these different types of markets?
Yeah, so actually, I have quite an extended retail background. Just working in high school or working in college, like working my way through. It's very different because in the luxury market versus fast fashion, like it's exactly that. It's fast, right? So the whole point is to push sales and have a lot of signage at point of purchase or drive the sale, right? But the idea within luxury is to like build that relationship with the client to build brand loyalty and repeat purchasing. So that's the business side part of it, right? It's like,
Right.
okay, yes, it's actually, and that's a known fact. Companies spend more money trying to bring in new consumers than repeat customers. Because once you have someone, that brand loyalty is there.
Right.
The marketing that goes into it, the upkeep that you have to do to make sure that that experience all the way through from when they enter to the transaction, like
Yeah.
it costs a lot of money. But in a luxury space, it's all about those smaller vignettes. It's about those themes. It's about what seasonal product you have that can
Right.
contribute to the brand's overall mission and like what I might call savoir faire. So every brand has their own distinct qualities or distinct characteristics about maybe let's say if Louis Vuitton has obviously the damier print, the monogram print, they have the lock and key. Like you want to highlight it's very specific. So if I put a bag down, I'm not just plopping it down and walking away. I'm making sure that the zipper is on the left hand side. I'm making sure
Right.
the lock is the LV monogram is on the outside. Like these are very little minute details that the average person may not care about, but if you don't see it, then you're like, oh wait, where's print or
Right.
something like that. So just sticking to those brand guidelines, and whereas like in a fast fashion retailer, typically there's more, like I said, emphasizing the sale. So having discounts or more overt signals and directions for like fitting rooms or point of sales or customer service. Like you might see those actual signs, whereas like in the maison, you don't have signs that say customer service. Like
Right.
you would go as you come into the store to say, hey, what do you need? What can we help you with? They say, I want to return. Oh, we'll take you to our concierge or, we'll guide you there. It's
Yeah.
again an experience.
Yeah.
And one last thing that I was thinking about is like intersection of products. So fast fashion retail might just have more intersection of different product lines, meaning like I don't know, I'm trying not to like say a specific brand, but you might have a rack of three different lines on the same rack, whereas in Louis Vuitton you have case lines for specific categories or seasonal items, or you
Right.
might have more intersection of cross promoting items. So let's say you have a hat and a leather bag and you have an outfit. Like
Yeah.
that's a good intersection to tell a story and to have a vignette. Whereas it's not just like, hey, here's a rack of like discounted clothes. Go ahead
Right.
and purchase, which is a different experience. It's still an experience. It's just not a luxurious one.
Does Louis Vuitton do discounting?
No, they don't do any
None.
like discounts at all. So if you are seeing that, it might. I don't think I've even seen it on third party reseller sites, but if you do, it would be through
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
retailer. Mhm.
One thing you mentioned was point of purchase. So what what does point of purchase mean to you, and what are good components, or what are important components of a good point of purchase display?
Sure. So, point of purchase is like the time and place where a transaction takes place, and is actually completed. So, usually, like with the client advisor, as we call it, or you might hear sales associate. Um, because of like progressive technology, like I think there's more mobile ways of completing those transactions. So, like within the luxury landscape, you want everything to be sleek. You don't want to, again, emphasize that sale. You just kind of want it to be seamless. So,
Mm,
you're seeing more of mobile phones, you're seeing more tablets being used to have customer profiles and taking credit cards or Apple Pay or whatever the case is,
yeah,
um, which is good because, well, and I can say that for Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton is a very progressive luxury brand,
yeah,
whereas like maybe some other heritage brands may not even be selling online still, like it just
right.
depends. But within the luxury landscape, I think the main driver or the mission within the store isn't to sell, like I've been saying, but to tell that story. So ultimately, like the point of sale is not as overt, like I was saying, just like POS signs, but you might see it in other competitor locations. So I definitely believe like that consistent and strong branding plays a huge role. So in LV, like, no, they don't, let's say you buy a bag, like, we're not, or the client advisor doesn't wrap it in front of you. Like, they
Right.
take it to the back room and with a concealed door. It doesn't even look like a door. Like, they try to make it so, like, hard for you to know that or remember that you're buying something. It's like, oh, I want to add this to it. I want, like, but then they come back and the box, you have the signature orange box with the blue and white ribbon, and they're like, perfect, here you go. So,
That's
there's
funny.
it's very intentional. So, and even like the POS system is not necessarily hidden, but it's not like a big computer that you might see at a fast fashion retailer. Like it's an iPad, or it might be on your phone, or it might be a computer, but it's sunken into the counter space.
Yeah.
So again, the experience and the seamlessness of it all. So I think that's how it plays a part. Not necessarily in like a VM perspective,
Yeah.
because the only signage that we ever did was at the front doors to talk about like COVID, like safe social distancing, or just to carry that on. We had like stickers that guided directions like on the floor, like, okay,
Sure. Right.
make sure you go one way
Yeah.
this way versus,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah. This conversation reminds me. So I used to work for Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts,
okay.
and so much of the type of thinking that you speak of is exactly, how we were thinking at Four Seasons. One example that comes to my mind is that when a guest would pull up, maybe in a limousine or a town car or something like that, the first thing that the doorman would do would open the trunk. So the driver always knew when they arrive at Four Seasons, they always open the trunk first. The doorman would pull out the luggage, look at the luggage tag, check the guest's name on the luggage tag, because most people have their luggage labeled, open the door and say, "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, welcome to the Four Seasons." And they'd be like, "Whoa, how did you even know who I am?"
Right.
They would be shocked. They wouldn't be able to figure out, they wouldn't be able to logically figure out, how did this doorman know who they were? And it's that kind of just like wow factor that kind of shocks people and makes them, it allows them to have this like seamless customer experience,
Exactly.
which they love, right?
Yeah, it's seamless and you feel like it's customized to you, and that makes you feel seen when, especially as a bigger brand and a global brand, when
Mm,
you get that one-to-one service and you feel special and you feel personalized, it makes you want to shop there. It makes you want to spend your money because you feel valued.
yeah,
And that's the whole point. So,
yeah,
and I think too that that's how Louis Vuitton sees themselves. So that's why they're not displaying prices everywhere, having discounts, or even when we hang fixtures or clothes on fixtures, we don't have just the tags hanging out. We make sure to tuck them in. We zip up everything. We button every button to the top, even if that's not in style. Like we're
right.
trying to show the value of the clothing so that, or
Mm,
other product
interesting.
categories, so as well. Like it's a symbiotic relationship.
Right. That's
Hmm.
fabulous. That's really great. Well, Jessica, this has been a really interesting conversation. I think that some of these things are fascinating, super interesting, and also really valuable for us to learn. I really appreciate you spending some time with me here today, and I think that we're going to learn a whole lot from this conversation. Thanks so much, Jessica.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
Okay, thanks.